How you doing? Hi, John. Hi, Big Sal. Hi, Mark. Hi, Acquired Taste. How you guys doing? Hi, Kinasaki. Oh boy, I've been really the last few days have been really. Hey, Eric. Okay, Every- it's it's got sometimes when you use another name, there are good reasons to, but sometimes I don't know who you are. Speaking of other names, Mr. Gumby, how you doing, Graham? Oh, neighbor, God, good day. How are you? Boy, we have had the winter that never came almost in New England. Uh, it's but then I saw the weather next week. We're gonna get cold and snow. Here it is. It'll be over in the near the end of February before we get anything like that. Hi, Adam. How you doing? Oh, hey, I got got my new strap. This is a gator strap I got for my Larique, and it just came yesterday. I got it from Jean Rousseau, and the color is Bigaroo, something like that. It's a French. I don't know if it's French or not. It might be. But it means it's a group of sweet cherries that are that color. So I guess sort of that color for it, and then it goes with the hands on the dial. Hi, Mattu. How you doing, man? Tony, good to see you. Um, okay. Um, Koji, hi, Koji. Yeah, they had. What happened was that the first one I got was an orange one. Now I had bought an orange one for my H. Moser Endeavor, and I think what happened was that when I ordered another one, they somehow got it mixed up with the orange one. So they sent me an orange one, and I sent it back and said, no, this is what I wanted. I even sent them a picture and everything. So anyhow, well, I got it now. Hi, JJ, how you doing? Um, what I'd like to talk about today is sort of the situation that most not watchmakers, but watch collectors are in. Hey, Rancher, um, and that is that wanting a good quality watch without having to pay a lot of money. And one way to do that is to sort of try to find the a really good watchmaker or something by a good watchmaker before they became sort of so expensive that nobody can afford, or not nobody, but most people can't afford them. And so let me start off with, I mean, you don't have to find a whole watch. You can find some aspect of the watch. Hey, idle time. Hey, Mason. Oh, you got oh, I love that Moser Heritage Center second. Funky blue. Nice watch. Hey, Boston. Patek Philippe. What about Patek Philippe? The anyway, well, instead of talking about brands, well, let's talk about watchmakers in the brands. Uh, Let me start off with this. This is a Harry Winston by Retrograde, and when I got this a number of years ago, I got it from an AD in New Jersey. He was a Harry Winston AD, and I think it was before they were bought by Swatch. So anyway, I got this watch. I really liked it. I like the I just like the idea of a retrograde, having a bi retrograde, has retrograde days of the week and the retrograde seconds. And so it's a retrograde. You can really see the old retrograde going like this, especially with the seconds. Now, the movement was made by Girard-Perregaux, and I got a hold of a guy that I knew working at Girard-Perregaux, and he was able to find everything about it, which one they used. He even had I guess it was a draft of the where they had the balance with showed Harry Winston on it. So anyway, but the other thing that was interesting was the retrograde, and I found out that that was done by Agenor, Jean-Marc Viderec at Agenor. So I thought, oh boy, and because I knew that he was the first watchmaker ever to win, uh, or they had an award for the watchmaker of the year back in 2007 for the Grand Prix. So I thought, wow, this is really cool. So I got a hold. I sent an email to Agenor and said, could you tell me about this? And that's how I met Nicholas Viderec, Jean Marc's son, who was running the thing. And this was not too long before Jean Marc retired. Okay, so one way to get a really top-notch watchmaker is to find a module or something like that, and there is no clue. I mean, there are probably hundreds of people who own these watches, possibly even thousands. I have no idea who, other than they could see in the back that maybe they can figure out that was a Girard-Perregaux movement, but they don't know anything about it, and that's what I wanted to talk about today. How do we not dig them up, but how do we find these people on these watches who are really good? Now, before going into something a little more esoteric, I wanted to start off with a person who I think is a world-class watchmaker, and I think that his watches are very inexpensive, relatively speaking. When I say relative, and that's Richard Harbring. Richard Harbring came out with a Harbring 2, the Felix, and some other ones. And the Felix was the first one to have I think it was called, the movement's called A11. It's a very simple way to get a top-rated watchmaker, a watch by that, a watchmaker. Back when I got it, it was around 4,000 or something like that. And, they're hard to find, but yeah, I mean, you can find them, but or either that or get on a waiting list. But sometimes it's really easy. I mean, sort of some of the obvious, really top watchmakers. Aha. Um, Clyde got a Moser Henry double hairspring. You know, the double hairspring is another example of really an incredible piece of horology. When I got mine, I wrote to H. Moser, and I talked to the guy who was, I think at the time he was the head of the movement and stuff. They have a department called, or not department, a branch called Precision Engineering. It's owned by H. Moser, and they do all of the movements and stuff. And so I asked this guy, I said, well, how come you have so few of these that come out? And he said, basically, he said they're so expensive to engineer. And in one article, they mentioned that it was harder to do a double hairspring than it was a tourbillon. And so to me, this is the kind of thing you have. I don't know who, Straussman. I'm not sure who developed that, but there weren't very many of them. You can find still some good deals on them, but that's the kind of thing that you can have. Now that doesn't have the name of a watchmaker, but somebody other than somebody with a WOSOP degree came out and came up with that. Adam, that was what I did with my early 2000 Roger Dubuis examples. Oh, exactly. The I'll tell you, a couple years ago, right before the pandemic, you could pick up these really great Roger Dubuis Simplicities. God, those are good watches. Um, I have a sort of a sportsy model of the Simplicity that is almost exactly like in terms of the case and a lot of the case, but not everything on the inside. But it's an RD14 in it, so that's another place where you can really get. I mean, you can really find some good deals. Now they're not good. Whoop, they've gone way up, so that's a problem. Hi, hater. Frederick Constant Heartbeat has an Agenor retrograde in it. Wow, I didn't know that. Oh, that's a great deal, hater. Hi, Tim. Watch gang. Hi, Brian. Good to see you. Oh, let's see. AWD Turbo Power. Hey, good morning to you. Okay. Is that like A12 field watch? Not sure what the A12, no, it's the A11 movement isn't. I don't think it has anything to do with that. Thomas, I've recently been looking into Suzuki Ishii, beautiful watches using high in crater movement. Um, there are some of those that have some beautiful movements in those craters. It was something I think there were some watches that the watchmaker doesn't know what to do with. I think one of the best examples of that, and I've also thought this was a great example of, I don't know, you have, when you put a governor on the accelerator of a car, it won't go very fast. I think Rolex has put a governor on its watchmakers, the guys who work for Rolex, because I think they got far more talent than they're allowed to let out of the bag, so to speak. I think they did that in 2004 when they reintroduced the Cellini prints. Here they came out with this beautiful movement with these. Everything about it was just really amazing. Wow, well, the Rolex buyers didn't like it. That's just not their kind of watch, I guess. And so they discontinued it. But that's sort of an interesting thing. I think you've got the bean counters and the marketing people saying, "Oh, okay, only we can't sell enough of these, so we're not going to do it." And this, I think, is something that I mean, Harboring, he doesn't sell that many of these. He sells what he and Marie, Richard and Marie Harboring need, and that's that. Um, Lane watches are cool. Yeah, okay. What about what about watchmakers? Let's talk about watchmakers. Hi, Rel. Um, a lot of collectors don't know the watchmakers. They, you know, to me, it's easier to find a good watchmaker. Well, maybe not. Some of the watchmakers are hard to find. Um, let me. This is sort of an unusual guy. This is a one by Daniel Roth, and Daniel Roth. The thing to me, the more interesting Daniel Roth watches are the ones he did while he was with Breguet. He joined Breguet back in the Chomet brothers hired Daniel Roth, and he sent in a resume to him, and he says, "This is what I know, and this is what I'd have to go back to school for." So this was sort of interesting. They said, "Well, here's a guy who's telling the truth." So they hired him. Chomet brothers did, and then he sent him back to school for a couple years. I think it was around 1976. He went to work on Breguet. Now, Breguet at the time was, down to, I think, one of his marine models or something. It didn't have very much, really, and it didn't look like what Breguet looks like today. So what he did, he turned the whole thing around with all of these great designs. It takes a great designer. If Matthew's still here, he's thinking that Matthew's our great designer that we had. But the other interesting thing Daniel Roth wasn't doing a whole lot of new movements at the time. They were using La Mania and some of the other more what back then it was like, oh well, you gotta we'll take this and we'll make a watch around it, and that's what a lot of these were, except in Breguet. And so to find a Breguet like the 3330, which was like it's like finding a Daniel Roth. And you might say, well, so what about Daniel Roth? Well, so what? You can't touch any of his new watches under $100,000. So why not try to find something? I mean, because they're interested, it makes an interesting horology, or at least an interesting story on that. Well, see, that's the whole point. AWD turbo power. That's the point. Is let's try to find these watchmakers where there was a point where they were making things that were not that expensive. Let me give you another example. This one, most of you guys know about this. I know that, and you can find these in certain places. There's a company. Let me see. Let me get the name of it. They go by THA. Okay, and THA was found. Let me see if I can find it. Hang on. THA, there it is. THA was found by F.P. Jorn, Denise Flegolet, and Vianney Halder. Okay, and THA stood for Techniques Horologie Appliquées. And um, so here you had these, and this was, I think, around 1998, 1999. They founded it. Now, there is a Cartier mono pusher chronograph that they did. And so if you look at most Cartier movements from that period, they're mostly ETAs, but then you flip it over on this mono pusher. I think it's called the Tour mono pusher, something like that. You look at this thing and say, my God, that's like a remarkable movement that they have. And so this is what we're talking about, not the anonymous ones. Like I said, that was the thing with Rolex. I think they probably have some really good guys in there. The younger ones, and of course, the idea, of course, we'll find some of these young guys that are just coming out. Like if we were able to find back in the early 2000s, late 90s, if we could, get something from F.P. Journe or Flageolet or Vianney Halter, Boucher, those guys, if we could have found one, before they started making things really expensive, that doesn't. I think the ones who are coming up, who are going to be really top watchmakers, man, I tell you, they do it. They make these watches, but they charge a lot for them. I mean, they're coming out of watchmaking school, charging 30, 60, $1,000 or Swiss francs or euros for their watches. So they're in other words, they're wise to it. Peterman Bennett is just those two guys make beautiful watches. I don't know if they're old enough to shave yet. They're young guys and they're doing this stuff, but boy, I tell you, their prices are very, very high, and not because they're greedy, because it takes a lot of time to do it, and so it's one of those things. Um, AWT Auto Power. Uh, you like to find someone like Butenlana. Before. It's exactly who I'm talking about and exactly what I'm talking about. Another guy, there's this wonderful pocket watch during the same period that Daniel Roth was working at Breguet. Something they wanted I guess it was almost like a duplicate of a Abraham Breguet watch, And the guy they had do it was Michel Parmigiani. He went down there and made. I've seen pictures of it. This gorgeous watch that he made. Early Parmigiani, actually, he like a lot of these guys when they got some of the top guys today, they were doing restoration. Um, F.P. Jorn did it for his uncle. Parmigiani was working for the Sandoz Family Foundation and that. So that's another place. And as a matter of fact, Kari Voutilanen was working at Parmigiani doing something like that. And he finally went off. In fact, he just went up the street, I think, and started his own company. Um, but that makes watch collecting much more interesting. Right now, I've got about oh, beside our own. This was by Agenor, on Movement by Agenor. This has got the Retrograde by Jean-Marc Viderec. Uh, uh, an interesting one that would probably cost more would be one by Richard Harbring before he started his own company. He was with IWC and came up with something, a type of really interesting chronograph, I think, for them that other, and now he has it uh, in the Harbring. John, let's see. It would be interesting to see how many watches are done with full automatic process. Rolex watches under the ETA umbrella. Yeah, there are not many handmade. And too, the funny thing is that back in the day, um, God, I forgot. There's a technique, not a technique, a general process where everybody worked on it. You had some guy lived in a farm and outside of Geneva during the winter time would be making a certain kind of gear, and that's all he'd do. And so you have all of these different companies that do things. When our watch was being made, I was wondering about some of the things, and there were two different companies making man-made rubies. One was making the ones that are used for um, pivot points, and the other one was making round ones. I mean, these are two different companies. Talk about specialization. I'm not sure what round rubies would be made for unless they were used for something like ball bearings or something like that. But if you go to, I mean, Voutilanen, there's a company called Combelain who the Larique is going to be working with on our next watch, and they've made dials for Voutilanen and a whole bunch of other top watch companies. And so today, I mean, like what we're doing is a little different than finding them. we're 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 finding all the different parts. And when we did that, we went about finding who were the best. And in part that was simply asking. We had this really good designer who probably got bored and left already, but he's um, we're we ask people. That's one of the easiest things, or see who the really top watchmakers are. Like we found Dufour had used um, Medellin for his dials, and so that's who we went to. Not because we knew they were the best dial maker, but we knew that he probably did. Or somebody like what's his name? Romain Gauthier. I found out that I mean his watches. That's another series of watches I can't afford. They're like $100,000 watches. I went and I said, well, maybe there's something by Jerome Gauthier that is not as expensive. So I went looking for them on Chrono 24. I found one. The cheapest one was $64,000. And but he was a student, or I guess his mentor was Dufour, Philippe Dufour. What about Kadoki? That is a great example. Stefan Kadoki, a few years ago, you could pick up one of his watches, I think for around 6,000, something like that. Um, Not anymore. you know, he was he was a guy. There's sort of a Dresden group in Germany. Klings, Kristen Klings, who I think is going to retire pretty soon. Marco Lang, who can't afford it anymore, and Kadoki. They're all in the Dresden area rather than Glashütte. And also, too, before he recently moved, Rolf Lang was there too in that same area. So there are a lot of, I mean, it's trying to get to know as much about the watchmaker as possible. Now, this isn't to say that somebody coming right out of watchmaking school isn't, well prepared, but I was reading about Daniela Dufour, who's Philippe Dufour's daughter, and they interviewed her. And she graduated from watchmaking school, and then started working with her father. I think she made her own Simplicity, and she was saying everything they taught me in watchmaking school, they told me to forget about. And so, but this is a better way to do it, or what they taught you in watchmaking school is some of the basics, but what Philippe Dufour knows and the people his proteges know is something beyond that. So that's another thing. So we can find these people, who are they? I mean, like, um, eh, any one of them. Hey, least time, how you doing? The English watchmaker George Daniels and Derek Pratt are outstanding too. Derek Pratt, yes. Derek Pratt. Oh, that's another thing. Derek Pratt worked with. He and Daniels were good buddies, but Pratt lived in Switzerland, and of course Daniels lived in. I think he lived in London. But if you look at uh, Derek Pratt's, let me see if I have it here. Here we go. Just so happened, Derek Pratt, really a good book that they came out with his stuff. Most of the things that he did, I think of note, were done with Urban Jurgensen. The problem with Urban Jurgensen, they're unaffordable. I mean, there was not too long ago, I was able to get in on when Urban Jurgensen was sold and they got rid of all of the old stock. They had basically a train wreck sale, and we got some great deals on those, but they're all gone now. Um, that's another thing to look for. Wait until you follow the train wrecks. The Remy Cool subscription tourbillon, just under 100,000. Yeah, there's another guy, Remy Cool. There are a lot of not too long ago I did a video on these three young French watchmakers. I think he was one of them. All of them are just like way up there. Yeah, the best designer, hater, we're not talking about Matto. We're afraid that somebody else is going to take our designer away from us. Beat Haldeman watches are beautiful. Look sort of like, yeah, Beat Holloman. His stuff is just fantastic. He's one of those guys. He started off about the same time as F.P. Jorn. That is sort of, you've seen sort of a new cohort come up. F.P. Jorn uh, didn't have any kids who were interested in watchmaking. My my kids aren't interested in watches either. They've got smart watches or something like that. Um, and so what FP Jordan did, that's how come he sold something like 20%. I think he sold to Chanel, because he wanted to have some. He figured once he kicks the bucket, he was telling everybody he was half dead, so they buy his watches. He was, he had this one ad. He said, "Well, you know, I was." He said, "If look what happened with somebody when some Ferrari guy, somebody died, and he went on after that." Daniela DeFore is also working on her own designed watch while also working on the Simplicity. Ah, Obud. Yeah, I'd like to find out more about that. I've been following Daniela. God, I feel like a stalker following Daniela on all of her stuff on Instagram. And yeah, she is doing some interesting stuff. Uh-oh, John, it's frying pan time. Okay. Céline Pinud has beautiful watches if you have around 65,000. Yeah. Looking for a solid white gold Neo vintage watch. Any recommendations? None that I can tell you about today. I'll put it that way. Yeah, yeah, I agree. Turbo power. Hey, Adam, I've seen those Cartier examples at Cellini's. Yeah, yeah, Cellini's. I was just looking at Cellini's. If you want to find the price of really expensive watches, check out Cellini Jewelers in New York. Anyway, well, listen, my time is up. I am afraid. This afternoon, what I want to talk about this afternoon, I want to take a look at between now and this afternoon, if you're interested, is to find some, is to identify as many top watchmakers as we can, and then see if we can sort of do reverse engineering and see if we can find out where some of this stuff is. Yeah. Okay, guys, take it easy. Thank you all for getting up. Well, here, especially in the U.S., for getting up so early. The guys in Europe is it's just the right time, and in Asia it's night. So take care, everyone.